I'm Tori and I go to Case Western.
Tori, must have a last name.
Tori Lai.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Ben Russo. I go to SUNY Fredonia.
I'm Taylor Black. I go to Allegheny College.
I'm Jared Yagi. I go to Texas A&M.
Andrew Carmula. I go to SUNY Buffalo.
Jacob Walmsley. I go to Allegheny College as well.
This is the Jackson intern team, and they're off to see the birthplace of Robert Jackson. Let's go. Woo!
Might be the best vantage point to be looking at. So we're sort of standing here, and the bridge would be really kind of over here on our right, and looking up towards the house. And when we get a little bit closer, you can kind of see. But there's a pine tree there and a pine tree there. That pine tree is that one on the left, and the pine tree there is the one on the right. So the house is right there. So we're really kind of staring across the creek, basically where those guys are standing, if there weren't any trees, and staring at what used to be the house. So that kind of gives you the orientation. It's kind of weird because the house is oriented facing the creek, so it gives you a little bit, but that's what the house looks like. And then here's a view, basically again, looking straight on the house, with the barn to the side, the silo, and then the structure here. And this will become important when we show you where we're putting in some of the one-by-ones. All right, again, same view, but coming at the side, kind of coming up the slope a little bit, and you'll see that when you get over there. So again, house, this is the rear L on the back of the house. An interesting ancillary structure, which we're really not sure about, right? It doesn't really kind of show up in the aerials that we have, and then another one here. So we think that our big barn is actually over the barn and some horses, and so they're standing like right below the house on that side. So, okay, you can walk over with these and kind of get your bearings when you're over there, once you kind of see the house foundation and everything. That'll help you orient yourself, because it's a little weird when it's all overgrown.
Work at archaeological sites, we really tried to do a lot of documentation to confirm what the context and association of different items is. How do they relate to one another? So certain items that we're finding or locating around the barn are probably associated with activities that would have been occurring at the barn. Just like some of the things that we're finding over near the house.
We know historically that it's Jackson's birthplace, and that kind of gets you through the cultural history aspect of it. Let's check it out. Now that you're actually here doing with an archaeological bent to it, what is it that you think you'll find of interest?
We're still in the really early stages of doing testing on site. We've seen some artifacts that we would expect to see, metal. There are some remains of potentially metalworking activities here. We've seen a lot of artifacts that are associated with potentially dairy activities as well. All things that we would more or less expect to see at a site of this age so far, but we still have a little bit of testing to do, so there could be some other things that would pop up that we're just not aware of right now.
So I saw a couple of holes of which you've kind of designated. How do you determine that that's a good hole to dig in?
Looking at the landforms that are out here, and also looking at the extant features of the foundations that are here as well. Dr. Milichke had a couple of areas, having done a lot of farmstead archaeology, there are a couple of areas that she is really interested in taking a look at. We're not doing too many excavations near the house at the moment, but in terms of the history of site use and the different types of activities that would have been going on here, the barn is of particular interest because we haven't done a whole lot with that area just yet. Rosie did a fair amount for her project with the house, but we're focusing more of our excavations right now up on what other types of extant features or features that are no longer present on site might be apparent in other areas of the site based on aerial photography and some other images that we've taken a look at.
You determined this location would be worth doing a little digging.
So there's obvious architectural remains on the landscape, but there's, even with the use of historical photos and the obvious archaeological remains, there's parts of the yard and the farmstead that we don't know what activities were happening there. So one of the things our question is, Rosie's project determined where a lot of the domestic trash was and the demolition trash was. We don't know where the actual farm and farming trash was being placed. So we have pedestrian survey down the hill. We're doing perimeter shovel
What's a
test.
pedestrian survey?
So that's literally walking through the woods and flagging where the last visible artifacts on the survey on the surface were, and then we are shovel testing beyond that to just double check where the extent of the artifact remains are. So we have two units down there right now, and then I'm interested in this area of the farm, of the barn, and then possibly if I can get 2 units down there, but it looks like next week might be a lot of rain. Over this way, there was, from one of the photos, an outbuilding, so they're trying to just kind of check out what's happening over there, and then possibly near that bush over there, there was another outbuilding. So I at least would like to do possibly 1 to 3 more holes up here, but we are turning this one into a unit today, so that the students can get experience mapping what's called plan mapping. It's kind of like mapping a floor, because it's unclear right now. These are obviously natural rocks, but at this site they were not using mortar to make their walls.
Right.
It's dry rock wall, so it's a potential that some of these flat rocks were stacked in the past. So by opening this up, we can tell if this is a cultural feature or a natural feature.
How big, to get the hole and to actually make it a representative, how big is big?
Well,
You know, how
This is an
wide?
STP, so we're kind of have regulations about how large those have to be. So usually minimum is 50 centimeters in PA, 60 centimeters in PA. But when we open this up, we'll open it up to a 1 by 1 meter unit, and that gives us a little bit more exposure.
Do you actually sift through this stuff?
yes, this was already sifted through.
Okay.
So because we're closing out the STP and making it a unit, she has to finish her shovel test pit paperwork. So she was working on this by herself yesterday, so she's instructing Skylar as to what happened in this shovel test pit and kind of getting her up to speed so that they can be partners for the unit. And then we'll be rotating other students into this unit so that they can all experience the mapping and the excavating around the rocks. So we're treating the rocks right now as a feature, what we call a feature, which is something you don't usually remove, you excavate around it. And again, we don't know if it's cultural or natural, so that's one of the reasons we're opening a unit to see what the intention was with these rocks.
One of the things that we really wanted to establish when we began the project really was, what are these landforms and how are they formed, to sort of tell us how old they are and what we could expect to find on them. So we're standing right now on a high terrace called T2, right? It's a glacial outwash terrace. It just means that it's an accumulation of water-worn and tumbled material, right, from the glaciers that was laid down here in this kind of large area. And then around it, what we see is further stream action, right, that's other moving things around. So every one of these landforms is of different age in origin. So up here is our oldest landform, right? So, but mostly because it's gravels. We're coming down really on either feature, but when they were digging this barn, you could imagine they were just going through gravel and rock, right? So this is why there are a lot of quarries out here, because this kind of landform is full of gravel and rock, and so the gravel industry likes this kind of landform. So there's very little soil formation on top of it, so we can see there's very little really soil on top of that. That stuff there. But as we move off the floodplain, or off this gravel terrace, we're in a couple of different situations. You want to walk back this way? This is our highest landform, which is T2, right? We usually start from the bottom and we count up. So we're actually progressing now to a lower landform. We've got a terrace up here, but look down ahead of you. Does it look like the land is rising or falling? Falling, good. What this suggests is actually that this is a separate landform than that one, which is again a separate landform from that one. So this is what we're calling the T1. This is a Holocene Terrace. So it was a terrace that would have been formed like after the glaciers melted, but it's actually a little bit younger than that one, but older than the sediments down there. So you can see it's a little bit higher, and we're almost not, if you turn around, we're even getting a little bit higher up there. So the top of that T1 is kind of where those guys are excavating further down, and we're on this riser between this terrace and that one. So again, as an older terrace, the stratigraphy is a little bit different here. We still have a plow zone, but we come down on some different kinds of soils. And again, this would have been stable for a little bit longer and more likely to give us some older occupations. Down there, we've got a plow zone. We come down on a B horizon and see, but it's a lot more recent. So this is where the broken straw has been moving back and forth after the glacier retreated. A lot of water, a lot of material in the sediment. So really we're dealing with that landform up there, T2, this landform here, T1, and when we get down to that lower area, T0, and T0 extends all the way around T2, and it encompasses that area between the bridge and the house that you saw earlier. And so kind of understanding how old these landforms, what can we expect to find there, really kind of helps us. So unless we have some very deeply buried soils, which you will see over there on the other side, most everything on the surface here is going to be pretty young except for up there. Right? And so we were able to find that little prehistoric flake, little tiny flake up there, which we would expect, right? Those older soils. But not much soil development here. We've got a lot more stream action. We have a lot, the water is coming through, it's depositing stuff. So our package of sediment is thicker. Right? We begin with the plow zone, right, which is about 25 centimeters thick. And then we have a kind of a subsoil, and either that subsoil is kind of a sandy clay loam or a clay loam. And that's our kind of B horizon, that's our zone of accumulation. They're not farming that stuff, and usually that's sterile. So when we find artifacts from the historic period, or even the prehistoric period on this terrace, we would expect to find them in the plow zone, but probably disturbed because that plow's digging down so deep that it's incorporating what we originally been the old prehistoric land surface and then the early historic land surface into one package, one plow zone, right? So this is why archaeology, we call that an AP, an A horizon, and a P for plow zone. So this is the T0, all the way down there around the corner. And so what we've been doing is we're testing the perimeter of the site, because in order to really register the site as a proper archaeological site, we need to be able to talk about its extent. And we have visible extent, so we did some field walking, right? But when we get down to this pit here, we don't have anything on the surface, so we need to find out what are the actual boundaries of the historic occupation of the site, and do we have a second.
Spring Creek Express. They dig, find, and recover.
About what the soils were before we even put shovels in the ground, and also what areas we would expect to find and what people should be. And for the most part, everything has been correct. So we're not just opening larger areas. So now we know, okay, we know that that we're probably not going to find a buried A over there, but we might, on the T1, we certainly might here. We're not sure. We didn't find one there. We did actually find one in the shovel test. And how long it would take our students to dig in some of these areas, right? So we know that it's shallow up there, those are going to be quick. So, we can make decisions then about how many we want to put in certain areas and how long it's going to take, because obviously we're a limited amount of time and the students are still learning. So that kind of helps as well. So that was one of our other goals. Obviously the other goal, of course, was to try and understand a little bit about the nature of the occupation at the site, and to maybe identify the remains of some of those buildings that you saw in those pictures, but that are no longer visible by surface evidence. And so that's the reason for some of the shovel test probes that we have put up there, some of those flags, to say, okay, well, let's pop one here, based on the aerials, we might actually come across something to help us maybe connect some of those historic photos with what's really kind of happening on the ground. And again, we're here for a short time, we can't be as comprehensive as we like, so we try to we make good guesses about what we find. Sometimes we look at what's on the surface, and that walk you over here. So we're on the T0 here. Okay, this is all coming around here. We're about a meter and a half above the creek. What happens to the soil? What color does it? What does it look like?
It's a little darker, more clayey.
It's darker, right? So that's a buried A. That's also a horizon. Whenever we find dark horizons, they indicate organic material instability, right? So that's what we call a buried A, an AB. And so that's actually a stable soil horizon that at one point in time would have been the surface of the ground, right? It's overlain with flood deposits. And because we found historic materials in those flood deposits, we know that they are of relatively recent origin, but not that recent. Now, when we find those buried A's, we get excited, right? Because sometimes it suggests that we have an earlier occupation. Could it be prehistoric? Is it an earlier historic occupation? We don't really know until we can either date it or find artifacts of it. This one happened to be sterile, so we don't know anymore, but what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to a 1 by 1 meter unit, and since we know what the stratigraphy is, we're going to shovel scrape down, and that'll give us a better chance to kind of sample that a little bit more.